Hello everyone, welcome to Analog IAS Current Affairs Analysis for 17 February 2020. These are the list of the articles that we'll be dealing today. The first article for the day is taken from the Hindu and it is titled "In Political Microtargeting, the Vulnerable Indian Voter." So this article is in the context of online political advertising and micro-targeting. So this issue came to prominence because of the Cambridge Analytica scandal, which was witnessed in the case of American elections, and generally many political analysts believe that this phenomena is not just specific to Europe or US, and it is also pervasive even in India in the form of fake news. So how exactly would you define this online political advertising? So any platform that can be used to spread out messages intended to reach a large audience through periodicals, websites that are very popular and are used for spreading propaganda, SMS, emails, or even social media platforms like Facebook, WhatsApp, Twitter can also be used for targeted online advertising for political gain. So what makes online advertising different from that of normal advertising? Essentially, there are two aspects. One is the targeting and the second one is invisibility. Now let us understand what targeting means. Online advertising allows, especially on social networks, for a kind of targeting that was not possible on same level before, because you have access to data from various sources which are collated together to decide about the mentality of a person and send out messages that suit the taste of the particular user. Secondly, it is the aspect of invisibility. If there is targeted advertising on a social media platform, not everyone gets to know about it. So this sort of political advertising can even be masqueraded as a genuine news, and readers or consumers of this particular advertisements can believe that particular political agenda is causing a threat to their existence, or it is causing certain advantages to their particular set of population. That is the difference that online political platforms bring to the governance level, and it is a challenge. Now what makes targeted a bigger problem is if you take a close look, two people connected to the internet from the same source can have two different news items. That is the difference in targeting. For example, if you take the case of Facebook, it allows to choose a person from a particular caste and also from a particular class in the same caste. That will allow particular targeting. Even within the same caste, you have different social segments, and political parties are using this data to send out messages that suit the taste of their audience. And the worst part is we are not even aware of the methods that they employ for this particular type of targeting. There are many algorithms that they can use. So because of all these reasons, there is a serious need for developing a data protection framework. This data protection framework should be as transparent as possible, and at the same time it should also empower a citizen and have access to information regarding the frameworks that they employ for collating this type of data. So in order to address this particular data protection framework requirement, our government came up with Data Protection Bill 2019, and it is India's first attempt to domestically legislate on the issue of data protection based on the committee report of Justice B.N. Krishna. So as a part of this data protection bill, the bill requires social media companies who are treated as data fiduciaries, or simply put service providers as per the definition of the act, to have their own verification mechanisms. So this is a problematic issue because there is no incentive for the companies to come up with a mechanism that will reduce their revenue. So there is this conflict of interest. But can the government legislate and put an end on the usage of political advertisement? That is a difficult proposition because Article 19 guarantees right to freedom of expression, and if we are trying to use any laws to curb that freedom of expression, It is against the fundamental law of the land. At the same time, the menace of fake news should definitely be contained, and targeted political advertisements, especially which spread hatred, should be curbed immediately. So, the only savior in this case is internet governance that has multiple stakeholders, and the best practices should be evolved and incorporated, most importantly in the Indian context, which is very sensitive to the spread of this fake news menace. That is the gist of this article. The next article for the day is taken from the Hindu, and it is titled Museums Without Meaning. If we take a look at Article 49 of the Constitution, the directive principles of the state policy says that it is the obligation of the state to protect every monument, and at the same time any place or object of artistic importance under a particular frame of law made by the parliament. So we have this the Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act 1958, which defines ancient monuments as any structures or erections or monuments or any places of interment or any cave which is not less than 100 years. So in this context, we also have to look at the other side of our heritage, namely museums, which act as a doorstep for the future generations to have a look back at our culture and heritage. Now it is very important to maintain the intellectual integrity while you are curating these museums, because we don't want to manipulate history. We want to showcase our history in just the way it is, and let the future generations decide on what is right and wrong. So in this context, recently the government initiated various programs to build new museums and constitute them. Now the big question that we have to ask is, how are you going to man these museums, and what is the required manpower and budget allocated for this? Secondly, what are the artifacts used? Are we going to have a separate department which handles these artifacts in the way they are supposed to be? Are historians going to be a part of this curation of museums? We don't have any specific instructions or any information regarding this. Recently, the government said that it is looking forward to create an Indian Institute of Heritage and Conservation. Now, the writer of this article believes that a customary glance at the institutional design says that it is nothing but an umbrella organization of all the existing cultural organizations. That is not going to help the case of conservation of our heritage, because we need more than that. We need to ensure that museums are potential sites of experiential tourism. Now, if you take the case of Club Atletico or the Topography of Terror, which is a museum in Berlin, this particular museum was converted into a museum because it was the site of headquarters where many political prisoners during the Nazi regime were tortured and executed. Now, the problem with the present narrative is that these museums are juxtaposed with the latest contemporary political relevance. Now, that is a problem because we don't want to distort or manipulate our historical culture or our heritage. India has many such sites like the Topography of Terror, which is a museum just we spoke about in Berlin. And these sites are potential sites of tourism with a rich cultural history. So, in order to develop this experiential sort of tourism, we need to take the help of various historians, sociologists, anthropologists, and come up with a narrative with the help of architects to ensure that the tourism potential is enhanced multifold, not just from domestic tourism but also from international arena as well. Instead of working towards that, what we are doing right now is not sufficient. So we have to work towards such kind of experiential tourism, and also at the same time maintain our cultural integrity. The next article for the day is taken from the Live Mint, and it is titled States Cannot Get Far Without Their Fair Share of Funds. Now, after the GST regime and the present economic slowdown, we have witnessed there is a significant reduction in the amount that states are getting because of the slowdown in the economy. When the GST Act was framed, the centre promised compensation for the states for any shortfall in tax revenue due to GST implementation for a period of 5 years. Note this point because there might be a confusion in preliminary exam where the examiner says that this is a permanent provision. No, this is not a permanent provision. This is only for 5 years. So this promise convinced a large number of reluctant states to sign on the new indirect tax regime. So as per the GST Act, states are guaranteed compensation for any shortfall below 14% growth. The base year was 2015-16. Now, if we take a look at the recent tax collections, the growth rate is somewhere around 9.8% in almost 18 states, which account for the maximum revenue. This shortfall was not being compensated by the present government because of the slowdown in the economy. The government also came up with a compensation cess, which was collected on the supply of select goods and services till 1st July 2022. So all the taxpayers except those who export specific notified products or anyone who opted for the compensation scheme are liable to collect and remit the GST compensation cess to the central government. Remember this point again for preliminary exam, not the state governments. So directly the central government gets this compensation, just like all the other cesses. Now these kind of delays will cause problems to capital investment in the states. And now we are moving towards cooperative federalism. Now we have recognized the fact that unless and until the states grow, India, which is a union of states, cannot grow together. So if you are hampering on the growth prospects of the states, we are actually diminishing the quality of economic growth in our country. So in order to ensure that, we have to improve our fiscal capacity. Now how do we do that? The most important recognition is the fact that the first priority should be states and not the central spending. That is to say, we have to put aside our political interest. The center should put aside their political interest and compensate the states. That is the gist of this article. The last article for the day is taken from the Live Mint and it is titled "Let's Think Afresh About How to Govern India's Gig Workforce." Now, what is this gig? Gig is a temporary contract job. It denotes a short-term contract or a freelance work as opposed to a permanent job. The contract employee gets paid for what is done. Now, what is this gig economy? You have a slew of startups like Zomato, Uber, or Ola, or any service-based products, app-based products, which are catering to the specific needs of different sects of population. Now, the employees or workforce enrolled in this payrolls of these particular firms don't have any social security. What is the social security? Say insurance or provident funds or any form of protection that normal contract employees get. Gig economy workers don't have that side of social security. That is the biggest problem. So with the fact that gig economy is growing significantly, especially in the terms of employability, because in the present context our labor laws are pretty stringent. So many startups are preferring this gig economy because that will help them have less hassles with respect to employing people, and also it is also working for the normal set of population where the youth are facing a severe unemployment problem. However, in the longer run, we cannot allow this lack of social security as a norm, and we need to look at certain ways where we can amalgamate the interests of both the corporates as well as unemployed youth. So we have to bridge this gap, and this is the onus of the government to do it. Now, how do we do it? The first step taken by the government is to consolidate the various laws under many states taking the best practices from both the central and states and consolidated it under a social security code. Now this particular social security code, the author says, must address three particular concerns: minimum wage levels, dignified working conditions, and minimum fluctuation in income levels. That is the most basic requirement. The other day when we were discussing about the World Economic Forum, we talked about something called the stakeholder capitalism. Now this is a new conception where all the stakeholders should be taken care by companies itself. In this context, where the gig economy is growing, probably the state can engage with the corporates in the form of corporate social responsibility and utilize the 2% revenue that is meant for corporate social responsibility to ensure the benefits of social security reach the gig economy workers. This is a new conception, and this is the true spirit of stakeholder capitalism that the World Economic Forum is talking about. That is the key takeaway from this article. That's it for the day. Thank you.